The ladder tool is extremely convenient and honestly does a pretty good job of drawing ladders in. Um, Having to model a ladder manually would be a huge pain. And CADWorx ladders actually look good. They fit their purpose and their function. They can be caged or non-caged. If they're caged, they can be right exit, left exit, or step through. There's a number of options that can be set, which we're going to go through right now. We're going to put in an example ladder. So I'm going to open up this ladder dialog box. This is a little bit more daunting because there are more settings than like a steel member. Let's go through the 4 tabs here real quick before I go to the details of each one of them. What you've got here is the position of the ladder, including its start and end point. You've got the dimensions of the ladder. You've got the dimensions of the cage. If it needs to be caged, these options become available to you. And then you've got the sizes of the members that make up the ladder. So let's start with the position tab. The position tab allows you to specify the location and placement, like the start and end point of the ladder using X, Y, and Z coordinates, and also the rotation angle. You can choose to specify the rotation angle and the position on screen. I would highly recommend specifying the position of the ladder on screen, as trying to memorize these or writing down coordinates is a bit of a pain. Instead, what I would do is draw a line that indicates your start and end point for your ladder. The first set of coordinates is the bottom of the ladder. The second set of coordinates is the top of the ladder. So your ladder is going to be drawn from bottom to top. So when you pick your points, when you're specifying on screen and you're picking your points, you pick from bottom to top. Angle, you can also specify that on screen, or if you know the angle, by putting in ladders over time, you'll get to understand what the angles are. You can just put the angle in ahead of time. All right, under our dimensions tab, this is the basis for your ladder itself without a cage. Even with a cage, this is the actual climbing portion and the extensions. You can choose to do a sloped ladder, although I'm not sure how it considers the slope. There's not really anywhere where it says sloped. But I guess it chooses its own. But usually you're not going to, it's like ship ladders, I guess, and you're really not going to have need for that because the majority of this is going to be done, or almost everything I've done has been just a vertical ladder. So what we have now is the rail width is your A dimension. That's center to center, not interior to interior. Actually, it might be, and we'll double check these. CADWorx is kind of funny where some things are exactly what they say, and some things, and you'll see that in a second, some things are like some dimensions that it calls out are not exactly what they say. So your rail width is between the two rails on the side. The height above the platform, this extension is above the walking surface of the platform. So it's in as far as CADWorx is concerned, this is basically the distance from your top rail to the top piece. So this being your top rung to the top of your ladder extension for your handrails. The top exit width, so your railings will widen up. That's the width of this section here for you to step through. Then you have your rung spacing, your average rung spacing, where it will not always be 12 inches. One of them will be shorter if it's not evenly divisible by 12 inches. And then you have your ladder offset. The ladder offset is based off of where you insert the ladder. If you're inserting it to the edge of steel, this will be 8 inches from edge of steel. A lot of times what I'll do is I will dimension to the center of a member and give this a larger offset, because when you're dimensioning in single line steel, you are dimensioning to the center of your beam or whatever it is. And so you're not going to be able to dimension to the edge of it in single line. Now, if you're doing something that's like a double line, sure, you can set it to the outside. And I'll show you that. It'll all make sense later on, but I'll show you what I'm talking about in a bit. But basically, I place it from the center of the beam and give it a larger offset. You're going to need to check with your standards, whether you're using PIP standards or whether you have your own company standards. you'll want to check with those and match these settings to whatever your company standards are. My company uses 1'6" on the rail width. We use 2 feet on the rail exit. We use an offset distance of between 7 inches and I think 7 inches and 1 foot is our maximum offset, with max one foot spacing on the rungs. So some of this stuff is based off OSHA, some of it is based off PIP. Check with your company standards if you have those. All right, moving on beyond this portion of the ladder is the cage. If you require a cage, you want to select caged ladder. You can choose whether you want it to be curved or squared off on this portion here. If you do choose either or, squared off will give a dimension for this squared off point. Then your curve will give a radius for it. And then you have varying dimensions that you can use. If your company has standards for this, you can enter them in. A lot of times, there are settings. I mean, a lot of them there are dimensions that companies have in their standards, and a lot of times there's not. They rely on the detailer to come up with these dimensions. It's not imperative that these match your company standards exactly. They get close enough. Ladders are more visual representation because the ladder itself is going to be detailed from the detailer based off of your company standard. Or if you don't have a company standard, based off of an agreement you have with the detailer off their standard. So it's not super important that your cage be exactly how the cage is going to get built. But these are all of the dimensions that you could modify to adjust the cage. The only one I would say that you might need to modify is the C dimension, because that defines your head clearance, and different clients or companies have a different requirement for what that clearance is. Some have it at 7 feet, some 7'6". It just depends. So you won't have to modify anything except for maybe that bottom hoop clearance. The other thing you will have to modify from time to time is whether you're going to have it open forward, which is a step-through ladder, or open left or right, which is a side exit ladder. If you're opening left or right, these two dimensions become available. The side outlet extension, which is basically the extension out to the handrail, and then the side outlet width, which is the distance between the rung and the start of the hoop, to allow for exiting. Again, maybe not super critical, but you can modify that if you need to. Sizes should not have to be edited. Most ladders are kind of constructed the same way out of flat bar and then round bar for your rungs. If you do need to make specific changes, the default here is using flat bar 3 by 3/8 thick, 3/4 inch diameter round bar rungs. Your hoops and cage bars are done with 2 by 1/4 inch. Check your standards again, but typically you shouldn't have to modify any of these sizes at all. And I'll get into modifying sizes when we get into the handrail section. But you can modify specific properties of these, but you shouldn't have to modify any of this. So let's get into inserting a ladder now that I got the description down. Let's start by canceling out of this and creating a line. So let's say I am going to put this thing to the outside edge of my surface, which is typically where your work point is. Like I said, I put mine to the center, and I'll explain the reasoning for that in a bit. But let's go to the outside edge. So we're going to go take this, and we're going to go down 7 feet. We're going to do a standard ladder, no cage. Do our ladder tool. We're going to specify the start and end point on screen, and I'm going to leave it with the angle of 0, which I believe will put it in the correct orientation on this side of the platform. Dimensions are fine. I'm going to leave them at the default since I'm not working off any kind of company standard here. I'm going to use CADWorx default. We're going to say OK, and it's going to ask me to pick a start point. Because we drew the line, we can just pick the start of the line at the bottom and the end of the line at the top, and the ladder is generated. Super simple. Once you've got your settings in place, inserting the ladder is a cinch. Is nothing to it. That being said, if you do have to make modifications to the dimensions for the ladder and the cage, save the settings. Once you've got the changes made, do a save as and save that somewhere. Save it, to where it looks for it by default. Access it from a server or whatever. Typically, it's placed in this CADWorx plant folder. But you'll have to get with your CAD administrator to find out where it's actually being placed. But save that configuration so that when you go back, it's going to be there every time, no matter what job you're on. You can also double click the ladder and make changes to it afterwards. Let's say I'm at -7 feet. Let's say I wanted to make this an 8-foot ladder. I'll say -8 feet. In this case, I'm actually going from 0 down, but you'll see that I can put -8 feet and it'll get longer. Okay, so I'm going to undo. All right, now, remember I was telling you earlier about dimensions not being exactly what they seem. Well, the dimension from here to here is, where's my Z dimension? Let's try that again. So we're going to go from here to here. Are we on the center? So look at what we're getting. We're getting 6 foot 11 1/4. But you can see that in this diagram, it's calling out that dimension, that the top of that rung, which is what it's talking, start and end point, right, should be 7 feet. And even if I were to measure to the top of the rung, mind you, this is a 3/4 inch rung. So the top of it is only 3/8 of an inch higher. That dimension is 6 foot 11 5/8. It's not exactly 7 feet. Let's look at this thing from the front. You can see where that rung is at. That rung is below. So if you're going for posterity, especially if you're later on going to use the model to draw your ladder in 2D, you're going to have to make some slight adjustments. If your company puts the top of the rung matched with the top of your, oh, and that's the other thing too, I'm not accounting for grading here, so don't lynch me because I didn't go to the top of the grading. I'm just doing it for steel purposes, showing it here. But if you're using something like 1 inch grading or 1 1/4 inch grading, you'll have to account for that. So in this case, this will be 1 inch higher. But even still, it's not exactly there, right? We're still 3/8 of an inch from here to here. That y-axis shows 3/8 of an inch. You're gonna have to add that 3/8 of an inch onto this, so it's 1 3/8. And now we're matched up with the top of our grading. Also, your company may use the center line. If they do, just raise it up 3/4 inch instead of 3/8 inch. So center line of the rung, top of grading. Okay, keep that in mind. That even though this says it's 7 feet, it's not exactly 7 feet. But you'll notice if I measure, this is actually going to be 7 foot 1. 7 foot 1. It's kind of weird how that works. I know. I don't know why it does the rungs that way. You measure from here to here, it gives you like an extra inch on the bottom. So, you know what I mean? Because we put an extra inch on it. I don't know why it chooses to do it this way. I don't know where it's getting the numbers from. But there it is. And it's probably getting them. Let's change this back to just 1. It's probably getting them from the bottom. See, 1 1/4, or yeah, 1 1/4. It's getting it from the bottom. So, all right, I know it's confusing, but bottom line, if you want this by default, the center line of this top rung is always 3/4 of an inch below what you set the height at. So just remember that, 3/4 of an inch below. It's not imperative that you raise it. I don't, because I typically want up redrawing. I'll use a ladder standard or something along those lines. But if you want it to match up, you're going to have to do that custom modification. If you want to line the center of the rung up with the top of your grading, 1 3/4 inch. If you want the top of the rung to the top of your grading, 1 3/8 inch. That's the limitation of CADWorx. It's one of those things that makes it kind of quirky. All right, now let's put a cage. Now, the thing is, this particular cage is not tall enough to put a cage. Or this particular ladder is not tall enough to put a cage. We only did a 7-foot ladder, and our minimum clearance is 7 feet, 7'6" in this case. You do have this extension beyond that you could technically put a cage on. I've seen some really stubby cages in situations like this, but let's just make it easier on ourselves and draw a line that's down 15 feet. So we have a legitimate need for a cage and room for one. So let's go back to that ladder tool and let's specify on screen, same dimensions, except we're going to include a cage, and in this case we're going to do a step through. So open forward Everything else about it is fine. I'm fine with the way the default is. I'm going to say OK. No, I don't want to save any changes. And I'm going to pick my bottom, pick my top, and it inserts at 0 because I chose not to rotate. So there's my caged ladder. And if you look at it from the top, you can see that it creates this little marker down here. That's the insertion point of the ladder. And that insertion point is 8 inches from the insertion point in the x-axis here, 8 inches from the insertion point to the center line here, and that's at 8 inches to the center line of the rung, center line of the banding or the rails. You look at it from the top, and you can see it's matched up with the edge of the steel. All right, so what is it that I do? Why is it that I go to the center? So what I'll do, if I need I need a clearance of, I like to stick around 8 inches for my clearance, but you need a clearance of around 7 inches to a foot. What I'll do is I'll take mine and I'll move it over to the center of the beam, and then I'll increase that offset distance to 10 inches. And this really just depends on the size of the beam that you're using. In this case, I'm using a pretty small beam. So if I measure from here to here, I've got 7 3/8. So I'm on the smaller side. You could do, you know, if you have a larger beam, say this wasn't a W 818, say it was an 831. Now I've just reduced that room drastically. So I've only got 6 inches now. This is a case where I'd want to use something like a 1 foot offset. So it changes to 12 inches. And now I go from the center of the rung to here, and I've got 8 inches of clearance. So it's based on your beam size. And it seems like more work than it is to just put it on the edge. But what happens is when you dimension in single line, you're only dimensioning to your center lines. So it looks kind of like this, right? When you dimension in single line steel. And so to dimension to the outside edge of the steel is difficult unless you're showing symbols. Then maybe you can do it. And even then it gets kind of messy. So what I like to do is give that dimension, you know, here to whatever that is. And in this case, with my decimal unit set up, it's showing 12 inches exactly. You get a nice round number, and you're going to the center line in your single line steel. So that's why I choose to do that. But, you know, use it at your own discretion. Okay, let's go back to this 818. All right, and that's it. You may get to a point when you have a smaller ladder. Let's bring this up 5 feet again, and you try to put a ladder like this with a cage on a say no, and you try to put it on a shorter point, a shorter line, shorter height. It's going to tell you cage ladder cannot be drawn. Cage ladder length too short. Creation failed. It's just saying that your ladder is too short. I think the minimum is somewhere like 12 feet for CADWorx to draw you a caged ladder. So keep that in mind. All right, last thing is we'll do an example of a side step ladder. I'm going to fake in a cantilever here of 3 feet, and I'm going to put this line over here and move it back 1'6". My company has a standard of a maximum of 1'9" from this point to this point, which is the side step of the ladder. And right now, as this is being, I think, let me do it 3 feet from here. That way we get a nice even dimension. So move this to the edge and then come back 18 inches. And now I'm probably 18 inches, probably less than that from here. I may need to go out further in this case, but I'm not going to max 1'9", and we can move it out. We can move it out after the fact. So let's put that ladder in. We're going to do a side step, and we're going to exit left to the platform, and we can always readjust the ladder after the fact. So let's put a cage. We're going to do a left exit. So we're going to say open left, and I'm going to specify it on screen and say okay. Do I want to save the changes? No. Go from here to here. And I did not set the rotation angle or choose to specify it on screen, so now I have to come back here and modify that, which we're going to use a rotation angle of 270. All right, so now you can see I've got the gap here for the left exit that will open up into this platform. Let's look at this thing from the top. It's possible that it may be too close if it looks like it's going to hit. So you can move it away a couple inches. Again, this is going to be based on your company standard. So, you know, I can move it away, 3 inches or something and get plenty of clearance. Keep in mind that this outer radius or diameter for this hoop or radius or whatever is for the lower hoop, not the upper. So see, the upper is a lot thinner. But that's a left exit. I can change this to a right exit, and you'll see it opens up to the right side. Okay. If you apply a color or layer to a ladder, let's put the support layer, and you go and make modifications to it, like changing it to open left, say, it's going to reset your ladder. So keep that in mind, that it will do that. It's just part of the program. So, and there we are. There's your ladders. You got your standard ladder, your cage ladder with open left and right. You know how to adjust dimensions. Most of the time, once you get your settings done, I mean, putting a ladder in is a cinch. I mean, if I know what my height is and I've got all my other settings correct, all I have to do is come in here, specify this on screen, maybe specify my angle on screen, and just say OK. And just click, and then did it not do it? Pick start point. Oh, here, let's try this again. There, here. Pick rotation and pick endpoint. Kind of weird how it does it in the middle. And I did one without a cage, so it's really long without a cage. There it is. All right, so that's how you enter your ladders. It's actually pretty simple once you've got the settings all set up. Which, like I said, you can set those up ahead of time and then just keep putting ladders in. You can even copy ladders from one place to the next. Just copy this ladder to somewhere else, and then make whatever modifications you want. Let's go from minus 15 feet to minus 12 feet, and it gets a lot shorter, or change the rotation or whatever you got to do. So that is how you create and insert ladders.